keynote for today is Mr. Luis Gerard. During this session, you may use the chat function to interact with the participants. I believe he has some very interesting questions for all of you. Luis is partner and business leader for Mercer in Singapore. He is a regular contributor to publications such as the Harvard Business Review and Talent Quarterly, and speaker in the areas of people, science, HR data, employee engagement, and leadership. In his commercial work, he leads a team of social scientists, engineers, and consultants to help clients and customers implement data-driven talent programs that improve organizational performance. His topic for the day will be the skills to build skills. It is time to take critical core skills seriously. Mr. Luis Gerard, please.
Thank you. And good morning to everybody. I'm super excited to be here. I've got a lot of content, 20 minutes, so I'm just going to power through. Everyone keep up, and I hope you have a sort of exciting and interesting day. So this is about the skills to build skills. And, you know, we've been talking a lot about the importance of lifelong learning in Singapore for years. And what we're trying to try to cover today is how technology is changing the way the world works, how people can learn to communicate and improve the skills that they have, the jobs that will require people to be in one place at a specific time and how those are becoming less common, and how the workforce will generally adapt to keep up. We've all got used to using QR codes to kind of get in. You know, all of us with the safe entry systems are, now used to using our phones to interact with, these funny little squares all around us. And this presentation will feature a lot of those QR codes today. So have your phones ready to sort of be able to interact with this presentation. So we'll do this in three parts. What's happening in the world? What should we do about it? And how should we do it? And as I said, throughout this, I want to be able to share with you some of my learning. This has really been a learning journey for me as we've explored the space of skills and what it really means to have skills to build skills. So I'll be referencing some follow-up reading for you to take away. So change really is the new normal, and I love history, and I love this chart sort of looking at, look, over the last 300 years, we've seen an incredible amount of change. But this is, in the broader scope of human history, really not normal for us. And one of the reasons we feel things are so intense is because this rapid change is not really what people have evolved for. And we used to learn about products and services, and now they learn about us. A huge volume of data is coming at us. And all of this learning drives an incredible amount of change. The faster we learn about the world, the quicker it seems to change around us. And this is really changing a lot of the work that we do. It's becoming more expertise-driven, more relationship-driven, and less transactional. And machines are taking over a much broader amount of the work that's in the world around us. So think about what that means for you. Just take a second. Think about your own job. What is the future of work for you? So when we look at these new jobs that are being designed by so many new organizations, and we start to ask, well, what does it really require people to be good at in order to be successful in these roles? We've identified, and I love this study from the IBM Business Value Institute, looking at the kind of skills that organizations are looking for as they go about redesigning so much of their work. And increasingly, we see these behavioral skills, things about flexibility, agility, even personal management, time management, and skills to be able to prioritize. The ability to work effectively in teams, to communicate in a business context, to act with integrity, to be able to innovate and display creativity. This new world of work isn't so much about the technical capabilities that we're bringing to our jobs, but equally important, and perhaps sometimes even more important, some of the behavioral skills that we're bringing into the workplace. The new world of work, yes, is being driven by technology, but the value that people bring to these jobs are very much human capabilities. So the new demands on us that are shaping us and the influence that the new technologies are having on us, as we start to put people into the workplace, these are really shaped by the kind of jobs that organizations are creating. Skills transformation is driven by the redesign of work. That's increasing competition for technical skills, but it's also driving some interesting changes, showing us the increasing importance of much broader cognitive capabilities, the increasing relevance of being agile, collaborative, and working together with other people in an effective way. It's also driving a more consistent and fast-paced change in the kind of technical expertise that we're seeing at work. Basically, expertise changes more often. So how are we responding to these new demands? I love this chap here. This is James Flynn. He's a moral philosopher. And many of you might have recognized this person as the sort of person who coined the Flynn effect. This is the evidence that our cognitive capabilities have increased dramatically over the last 100 years. In fact, if I was to ask many of you in this conference today to take an IQ test and compare you to equivalent results from people 100 years ago, you would be relative to those people on these IQ tests, just at the point of genius. Likewise, if we were to take the norms of people taking cognitive ability tests 100 years ago and compare them to people today, and the baseline score is 100, they would get a score of about 70, which is just on the cusp of mental impairment. So James asks an important question. Does this mean that people 100 years ago were mentally impaired? The answer, of course, is no. It's just the demands on them of that time were very different. They had a very different, what he calls, habits of mind. And this shows us that over the last 100 years, we've built very, very, very powerful habits of mind, or skills to be able to use our brains in much more effective ways to solve more complex problems around us. As jobs change and as the demands on us change, we adapt to be able to meet those challenges. In fact, one of the things that really defines humanity is our ability to adapt to the world around us. We're incredibly capable at change. So how do we start to build this capability into our organizations? How do we make sure that we're approaching our work understanding that one of the core things that humanity does well is change? So perhaps the answer is a growth mindset. And I find Satya Nadella at Microsoft an inspirational leader. And he's always talking about the importance of being a learn-it-all, not a know-it-all. The importance of having a growth mindset, a culture that allows us to learn all the time, that to be not afraid to try, to be agile in our ways of working, to always search for better. The problem with this is that mindsets are belief systems. They're great for building culture, values, and shared behaviors, but are they actually useful for building individual competence? The data and the science of this is very mixed. When we look at the data for growth mindset interventions, it doesn't always work. And I think we should all ask ourselves, why should it? When was the last time really just believing something different made a huge individual outcome at the individual level? Sure, it can help us build communities, it can help us build cultures, but does it help people actually learn differently? This is why we must start to look at the connection between the culture that we build and the capability that people have. So what is the connection between culture and capability? I think the answer is core skills, sometimes called soft skills, sometimes called life skills, human skills, pick your nomenclature. And these are skills that can be applied across all aspects of our life. Yes, at work, but also in our personal lives and with our families. And when organizations talk about them, they're often very tightly aligned to the mission, vision, and values of those organizations. This is how we want our people to behave and how we want them to show up, regardless of the work that they do. So we wanted to learn about these core skills. How relevant are they? Are they important? And as part of our work with Skills Future, we embarked on a really interesting and exciting project within Singapore. We looked across a large number of organizations, both employers across a number of the different industry clusters you see here, and education institutions to find out, what are you doing with these skills? Are they important to you? And what we found is that many organizations, and as we saw with the IBM study, had started to talk about these skills as not just nice to have, but essential for success. For example, what does it mean to be an effective entrepreneur? Well, the answer is the energy, the ambition, the adaptability, the self-management. Many of the skills required for effective entrepreneurship tend to be these critical core skills. So the model that we came up with, working very closely with the Skills Future team, looked at these three large dimensions, these clusters of skills. Yes, those cognitive skills continue to be important, particularly being able to make sense of a huge amount of incoming information, see patterns, ask difficult questions of that data, rather than just taking what you're seeing on face value and for granted. Transdisciplinary thinking sounds like an awkward concept, but we all know what it is, being able to take what I know and connect it to what someone else knows, to be able to think laterally as well as horizontally in our skill sets. The second, being able to interact effectively with others. We all talk about the importance of social skills, but actually we've seen a real evolution in this space. It's almost like technology has brought us closer to other people. Things like empathy and understanding our customer in customer orientation, being able to act in an inclusive way, to be able to have influence. I love this skill of influence. You know, social media has really made influence such an important part of what we do when we communicate with large groups of people. It's also got built in there some aspects of political skills. You know, how do you understand how to get people to do what you need them to do? These are incredibly powerful, important skills and are really the foundation of being able to understand how other people see you. Staying relevant, perhaps the foundational skill in this cluster of three. How do we make sure that people have the adaptability, the learning agility, the global perspective to always make sure that they can contribute effectively in the economy? My favorite one of this cluster is actually self-management. Sounds sort of old-fashioned and boring, but we all know that in the modern age, particularly under the influence of COVID-19, we're all having to self-direct much more often. Our students are having to do that. Our employees are having to do that. All aspects of our economy, people are having to decide what they will do and when they will do it with far fewer boundaries. And we often talk about learning motivation, having the motivation to learn, but do we talk about teaching people to have the discipline and focus to put effort in when it's needed? Self-management is a critical core competence for not just learning, but also making sure that we're staying relevant in the modern economy. So reflect on how all of these things have become more relevant as COVID-19 has very rapidly changed many aspects of our lives. We called these the skills to build skills. Why did we call them that? Well, if you think about it, cognitive capabilities, learning from others, constantly having that drive to find new information and stay relevant, these are the foundational aspects of what it means to be an effective learner. So then we ask ourselves another question. We all know these skills are important. Do we tell people they're important? So we did a study. We used some technology to scrape job adverts from the internet and look at how many of those adverts articulate the need for these critical core skills. And we did that across a number of different countries, in the United States, in Europe, and in Asia. And this here is the data that shows the average number of these core skills per job ad in different countries. So you can see, it's very interesting to note that in places like the United States, and to some extent the UK, they mention these kinds of core skills much more frequently in their job ads. They signal their importance when they look for new employees. It's also interesting that they signal a broader range of skills. A much wider number of these critical core skills show up in job ads. In Singapore and in Hong Kong and in Shanghai, where we also looked at this data, we saw a much narrower set of descriptions. So we have to challenge ourselves. If we believe these things are important, if we know that they're becoming increasingly relevant for the world around us, how are we letting people know that that's the case? What are we doing to really take these things seriously? We have to all ask ourselves this question. And to me, this shows up not just in job ads, but also in the kind of people that succeed. You know, how often in organizations do we see smart but difficult people get ahead? It's okay for them not to have these skills if they have other technical competence that we really value. Dr. House, I think, is a wonderful example of this. If you've seen this television show, he's a brilliant doctor who's just so obnoxious that most of the show is his colleagues trying to manage him rather than him actually treating patients. And, you know, I think increasingly we will see this kind of behavior being totally unacceptable in our workplaces. So how do we make a difference? So easy to say this is important. What do we actually do? I have 4 things I want to offer you. First, be the change you want to see. Ask yourself how you are connecting culture and capability in the work that you do. Growth mindset can help us here. Build those sets of beliefs and values that really, really show other people that learning matters. And remember that people are more likely to build cultures around behaviors that they're actually good at. To me, this is why learning is important. Get your role models right. If leaders and other people in positions of power are not actively showcasing learning, adoption will be slow. Second, make sure we're articulating demand. I said we're not doing this enough here, and you know there is, I think, good evidence for that. So when we look at job ads, both internal and external, make sure we're articulating our needs clearly. Ask ourselves, how are we including these in our evaluation criteria at all levels of our economy? When we think about how people progress in organizations, do we actually pay attention to their progression of their core skills? It's incredibly important. Third, how do people signal these skills? So signaling technical skills is relatively easy. You know when someone knows how to do something technical, you can just either observe them or give them a test. In fact, you know, one of the things we've seen in COVID-19 is that many of our assessments have now moved online. We have a huge digital assessment proctoring business where learners can join and be assessed no matter where they are, and the proctoring technology makes sure that that's being done with high integrity. But then we have to ask ourselves, so what does it mean to signal these core skills? And I would offer you that actually a lot of these core skills show up in our reputations, in the way that other people perceive us. So it would be really interesting to start to explore how we can use peer ratings, like 360s in organizations, or other soft skills assessments to get a much better sense of who has these skills and to what level of proficiency they're actually being developed. The last thing I would say is ask yourself, well, what role does personality and cognitive assessment play in this equation? You know, those things are really the raw materials of these kinds of skills. And sure, you know, they might push people one way or another, but we should ask ourselves, in what way do we actually talk about personality and cognitive assessment as a prerequisite to some of these other skill building techniques? And last, I think we all have to agree to make the development of critical core skills, like the ones that I've shown you, the cognitive capabilities, interacting with others, being adaptable and maintaining relevance. These things must be skills that we take seriously and we build in to our systems to make sure that we are continually training and developing them in people. Make sure they're culturally aligned. Make sure that people who have these skills are asked to teach others, you know, spend more time building mentorship networks, continuous feedback, get much more comfortable with being assessed and to be collecting that information from other people. So you're very clear on how you're perceived. Make them tangible. So another thing that we really saw in our work with and project with Skills Future was it was incredibly useful to start to really articulate what we mean when we say someone is proficient or advanced in these skills, and to really spell out what that means. And then, of course, measuring outcomes. Do we actually see people building these skills, and do they deliver value for our economy and for our organizations? So I would finish with a sort of broader statement about the skills problem ecosystem. And, we know that organizations, businesses, governments are really pivoting to try to become skills-based learning economies. And so for us, this starts with the new demands that are on us. There are new things that need to be done, new jobs. Job redesign is the start of a skills transformation. And then there are a number of other important connected elements. We need to accurately identify the skills that are important now and the skills that are needed in future. We then need to figure out who has these skills. We need to create mechanism through which to assess and signal the importance of these skills to people and to find out who has them. This is important because very often organizations just associate jobs with skills and assume the incumbent is a person who, is defined by their job. People have much broader skills often than the job that they're doing. We need to build more continuous learning systems in order to be able to develop those in a more consistent way. And then last, we need to think about, well, what's the incentive for this? We need to think about rewards. And we have an ongoing project looking at pay for skills and how organizations actually start to create a market for skills rather than just for jobs. It's an incredibly interesting and difficult challenge, but we're working on it, and we think there's a huge amount of data that we can leverage based on the work that many organizations that you're seeing on the screen here are doing. So we're challenging ourselves to really ask, well, how do we really incentivize the kind of adoption that we're looking for? So with that, I hope you've heard the core message here that skills to build skills are an important part of economic success, not just now, but also in future. I hope you've taken away some of the interesting reading that I've been able to share with you. This was really an important learning journey for me, and I hope you've enjoyed this session this morning, and I want to thank everybody for taking the good time to listen to me. And with that, thank you very much.